Hi and welcome to another episode of Delaware County Political News Meet the Expert. I am your host, Larry DeMarco, and today we are here with Diane Cornman Levy, the Executive Director of Women's Way, a nonprofit organization committed to advancing gender equality and justice. Between 2007 and 2015, Diane was the Executive Director of the Federation of Neighborhood Centers, a nonprofit organization that provides health and human services to more than 35,000 disadvantaged individuals per year. Prior to working at FNC, she was the founder and Executive Director of Journey Home, a nonprofit organization that provided health and human services to more than 2,500 individuals per year. In 2011 to 2015, Diane served as the co-chair of the City of Philadelphia's Food Policy Advisory Council and currently is a member of the FPAC, Thomas Jefferson University's School of Population Health Advisory Board, and the Philadelphia's Declaration of Play Council. In 2015, Diane was co-founder and executive director of Natural Creativity, an educational initiative dedicated to helping young people develop a foundation for lifelong learning that promotes self-direction, constructive purpose, and personal fulfillment within a commitment to social equity. In 2016, Diane was a state representative candidate for the Pennsylvania 168th Legislative District. Diane, thanks for being a guest on Delaware County Political News.
Hey Larry, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Diane, you were the Democratic candidate for the 168th Legislative District. Tell us about that experience.
It was probably one of the most amazing journeys and experiences I've ever had in terms of it really helped me advance my leadership skills. It really worked. It helped me in terms of really expanding my network. So when I was asked to run, and I was asked to run by Diane Cornman, I thought this was a tremendous opportunity to be able to have a larger platform around issues that I deeply care about.
Leanne is the state representative of the 164th.
Yes, and she is very committed to getting more Democratic women elected to our state government because we have a very low percentage of women who are now currently legislators. So, we really want to have our state government really represent more the demographics of our constituency. So it was a great opportunity for me to stand up and say, yes, I'm going to run for this position, and it really helped build upon all the work I've been doing for so many years around social justice issues. So to me, it was the most incredible learning experience, and like I said, it took my leadership skills to a whole nother level.
Exhausting too, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how hard it is to run for office. I worked about 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. I quit my job at Natural Creativity, which was a big decision for me and not an easy decision, but I really wanted to put everything into this to maximize my probability of winning, which unfortunately I didn't. But it was a challenging year for a lot of people running, and a woman and a Democrat has never won in the 168th district, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to make history, which unfortunately I didn't. But I did well, and hopefully it's paving the way for other women to run.
You were the highest vote getter of the Democratic candidates in Delaware County, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And I have to say there are many women running this year, not just for the 168, but from all levels of government, and they were inspired by me and other women running in 2016.
After the election, you began working for Women's Way.
Yes.
Tell our viewers about Women's Way.
Women's Way is a local nonprofit organization based in Philadelphia. It was started 40 years ago by 7 women-focused, women-directed nonprofits that were addressing issues that people considered controversial: rape, gender-based violence, equal pay for equal work, reproductive health and freedom. These organizations were really struggling to get funding because people wouldn't fund them. So they united, and they realized that power is more powerful. When you have collective power, it's more powerful than individual power. So they formed an organization called Women's Way 40 years ago with the mission to advance gender equality and justice for all. Well, that mission is still, today, it's still its mission. It's still prevalent. We're still dealing with the same issues we were dealing with 40 years ago, believe it or not. Reproductive health and freedom, gender-based violence and safety, leadership development of women, and the last area is economic security of women. So we're a community foundation, and how do we make impact? It's three ways. We connect, we empower, and we invest. We connect different stakeholders to come together around these issues we care about, to foster learning, to hopefully foster collaboration so people will coordinate and align efforts. We empower individual organizations by amplifying their voices, by building capacity of these organizations to deepen their impact. And then we also invest through grant making and technical assistance and capacity building efforts with the sole focus of achieving gender equality and justice for all.
Diane, what are your duties for Women's Way?
So as executive director, I came on board after it was some challenging times before I came on board, and they created a new strategic plan. So I'm implementing the new strategic plan and the restructuring of Women's Way. So what does that mean? So I helped really design our grant-making programs so they're more impactful, more nimble, more responsive to needs of women and girls, building a more high-performing strategic team, building a board that's diverse and also deeply engaged, and engaging donors and driving a lot more money to this organization. So I'm in charge of really restructuring this organization so it becomes a powerful catalyst for change around gender equality and justice.
Are there any other branches of Women's Way in any other county or parts of the state?
No, so Women's Way is, like I said, it's housed in Philadelphia, but we serve the 5-county region and also southern part of New Jersey. There are other foundations that primarily focus on women's issues in the area, but there's no other branch to Women's Way.
Now, it's a very large nonprofit. It's grown. What other organizations are there that perhaps do the same thing in other major cities like Pittsburgh or?
There's a lot of foundations that just focus on women's issues. There's the Dallas Foundation for Women. There's Chicago Foundation for Women and Girls. There's a foundation in Boston. So there's almost every major city has a foundation that really focuses on women's issues. And like I said, Women's Way really was spearheaded that whole development of these type of foundations 40 years ago. And then there's smaller foundations in the area. So there's some in Chester County. There's the Chester County Foundation for Women and Girls. There's the New Century Trust, which is also focusing on women's issues, and that's here in Philadelphia. So it's growing. I mean, there's more foundations that are focusing just on gender equality and justice issues.
So you said Women's Way spearheaded it. Was it one of the first?
It was one of the first.
Very good.
One of the first, and they did some really groundbreaking work. And it's amazing how many women have been impacted by Women's Way, have been involved or engaged in Women's Way. It's thousands and thousands of women.
Can you share a little bit about that strategic plan? What your plans are for the future?
Sure. So we designed 2 new grant-making programs. And one, we wanted to be able to respond to urgent needs of women and girls as they arise, because as you know, in this current political climate, there's a lot of things that are happening on the policy level that are really affecting the safety and also just opportunities of women and girls. So we created something called the Immediate Response Action Fund. And that is a grant-making program that deals with urgent needs of women and girls as they arise. And we make decisions within 10 business days upon receiving a completed application. So typically philanthropy is very slow to respond. You have cycles that, 1 or 2 cycles per year. You have to submit a proposal maybe in the fall or spring, so you have to wait. And the decision-making process takes usually weeks or several months. We wanted to be able to respond quickly to urgent needs because people can't wait. So like I said, we designed this program so once we receive an application, we will give you a decision, the applicant, within 10 business days. No one else is doing that. No one else is doing that. And I'm not sure, and certainly not in this region. So one, we're dealing with urgent needs. And the other end of the spectrum of philanthropy is we need systems change. As you can see, there's things that are just, we keep having the same problems year after year after year. For example, we have over several hundred organizations dealing with the economic security of women and girls in the Philadelphia region. Yet, poverty, we have the highest poverty rate of the 10 largest cities in the country. So there's some disconnect going on. And the reason is so many organizations work in silos. as well as grant making. Foundations work in silos. So we created another grant making program called Collaborating for Gender Equity and Justice Fund, which builds cross-sector partnerships with a long-term vision and long-term strategy to foster systems-level learning and change. So what you do is you bring government at the table, the private sector, nonprofit, philanthropy, and those who have the lived experiences. They come together and they've worked together on these issues for many, many years. So there's a process for fostering collaborative learning and thinking and doing. We're the backbone organization. We're the convener of those stakeholders.
Who are some of the participants that are collaborating for women's support?
Well, we're supporting one that's called Shared Safety, and it's called Collective Impact, which is a methodology for building cross-sector partnerships. And Shared Safety is focusing on gender-based violence and ending the epidemic of rape and domestic violence. There's a backbone organization. There's three backbones: the Women Against Abuse, and also the city's Department of Behavioral Health. They are working now with over 30 partners to create a systematic approach to identifying those who are either at risk or undergoing domestic violence, relational violence, and then giving them the resources and supports they need to help break the cycle. So that's called Shared Safety, and you can Google that and look it up. It's a huge collective impact initiative, and they just won a national award for doing groundbreaking work in this area. We're one of the partners in that. The other area we're addressing is economic security of women. Because our argument is, if you want to end gender-based violence, if you want to really decrease domestic violence, we need to improve the economic security of women. Because it all stems from economic insecurity, whether it's access to poor education, access to inadequate health care, being stuck in really bad situations. They're economically insecure. So we launched this huge initiative to advance the economic security of women and girls in the 5-county region.
Diane, recently the news has been particularly disturbing. Any man with power, celebrities, athletes, entertainers, politicians, accused of sexual harassment. What does this mean for society and this Me Too movement? Please comment.
It has a lot of implications. One, it shows how pervasive this issue is and how institutionalized the abuse of power is. This is particularly focusing on gender abuse. And I think it speaks to that, that as a culture, we have an issue and a problem with power dynamics. And I think we could apply this to women, we can apply this to people of color, we can apply this to socioeconomic class. We see these power dynamics happening all the time where people abuse power for their own advantage. So one, there's a real cultural systemic problem that we need to address. And it's in every institution, right? It's in the political system, it's in our workplace professional system, it's in our religious system, so it's in our education system. I mean, I could go on, right?
Of course.
Right. So that's one implication. The other implication is the power of collective voice. A lot of people say, well, why didn't these women speak up sooner? Because it's all about power. I mean, the whole point of sexual harassment is if you speak, you'll lose your job, or there's other threats, right? So it's all about controlling someone. To do it individually, you really have no power. But to come out as a collective voice, as you're seeing, not only does it give permission of other women to speak up, but it also actually starts saying this is not just an individual issue. This is a systemic, cultural, structural issue that we need to address as a country.
Let's emphasize that point, Diane, because sometimes victims are criticized for not speaking up at particular times, and all of a sudden there's a floodgate and people comment on the timing. And you mentioned that it's a power issue, so why don't people speak up at certain times and then speak up later?
Because the whole thing is going back to the power issue. So if you say, listen, I just grabbed your body part, or I made this sexual comment, if you speak up, you'll never get a job in this industry, or you will lose your job, or I will mock you so much no one will ever want to hire you. As an individual, what do?
Stay silent.
You stay silent. You stay silent. But because they can say you're just crazy, right? Right?
You won't be believed.
You won't be believed, you know. So then people start questioning you, right? And so what happens then is, or somehow it's your fault. Same thing with rape. Rape is rape, no matter what. I don't care if you're walking down nude on the street. That doesn't give someone the right to rape you. Rape is done by rapists. But yet it's stigmatized, like somehow women, and it's not just women, men are getting raped. Men are getting harassed too. This is not to say this is always a man to a woman. Sometimes it's men to men. Sometimes it's women to women. I think it's a human issue. It's not just a women's issue. And I want to be very clear about that. So the whole thing about harassment or any kind of abuse of power is about keeping people silent, no matter what it is. Right?
Certainly. So the Me Too movement now is women are empowered to speak up because they're being believed.
Yes. And they're also saying, me too. See, it's not just happening to me, it's not just an individual incident with me. It's not just an individual incident in Hollywood sector. It's now coming out in all these other different sectors. So it's a cross sector. It's a cultural issue. Now we have a president of the country who admittedly sexually harassed women. And he's the president of our country. What kind of message is that saying to women, men, boys, and girls?
How about the person who says, oh, now it's just guilt by accusation. Just someone speaks up and makes an accusation. Let's immediately believe all the accusers.
Right.
What's danger's there?
There's danger there. So we're supposed to have a justice system, right? Like, you're supposed to be innocent until proven. Unfortunately, sometimes when you're just accused of something, then people assume you're guilty. So there's one area you don't want to undermine the voices of people who have been recipients of sexual harassment, but those who have been accused have the right to due process, right? Right? So anyone could accuse someone of someone and destroy their reputation, but we don't want to just say, hey, let's just listen to the one who's been abused or is who's accusing that abuser. That person should have a right to due process, right? And I think, and if someone says, hey, I admit it, I did it, but someone's saying, no, this is not true, then there should be a process in place to say, is this really a true accusation? So there's this balance, right, of protecting those who are coming out saying they've been harassed, but then also those who've been accused of harassing. So we do need to be, I think we need to be fair.
Diane, where do we draw the line in what conduct is appropriate in public office?
Larry, that's a really good and important question. If you look at the private sector, the workplace, they take sexual harassment very seriously because they certainly want to protect their employees, and they certainly don't want to get sued. So they implement sexual harassment policies, and they work to enforce these policies across all levels of a business. The political system, either they have policies or they're very weak and inadequate and they don't enforce them. So there's not the same level of accountability.
Or there's no accountability.
So we should hold our public officials to the same standards we do in the private sector. And I still argue in the private sector, as you see, there's still not enough accountability in enforcing sexual harassment policies. But if you talk to any human resource department, that's an integral part. And people have to sign, employees sign on the line about sexual harassment policies. Where is that happening in our public political system? It's either not happening at all or it's rarely happening. And so we need to have the same standards, the same accountability, and the same transparency standards held that we do in the private sector.
As an advocate, what advice do you have for people who want to change things, who are fed up and they want to make a difference?
Another very important question, and we're getting calls every week about, I want to get involved, how do I support, what can I do about these issues, particularly around the sexual harassment that's going on. So one, there's lots of organizations which there'll be a list, that are addressing these issues. So you can get involved, you can volunteer, whether it's Women Against Abuse, Women Organized Against Rape, Women's Way. There are organizations that you can actually say, hey, I want to get involved. For example, we have a group called the Young Women's Initiative. It's for 21 to 45-year-old women. It's a social network with a focus on social justice issues. Part of what they do is educate themselves about the issues. So what's happening, right? So get informed about it. What are your rights? And what organizations are addressing this? And you could even just do a Google search in terms of people that are working on gender equality and justice issues. And again, there's a list that people can look at. So they can volunteer, they can get educated. If they see or witness it, speak up, right? If you're in a workplace, make sure you have a sexual harassment policy. Make sure that it's thorough and comprehensive, and then it's being enforced. But as a bystander, I think now that you see people are speaking up, speak up. But if you feel alone, get involved with a group that's doing this work, because then you'll have the support. So your voice is not a voice of a single person.
What does it mean to not be a bystander and speak up? Be specific.
What does it mean? It means you're actually taking action to address this issue. So whether it's speaking up, whether it's volunteering and getting involved, whether it's writing a blog about it, I mean, you are actually taking action to address this problem. And I think what happens is a lot of women are experiencing a lot of stress around this. And when you take action, your stress and anxiety actually decreases, because you're channeling that energy into something that's positive and productive instead of just saying. So it changes a victim helpless mentality to one that's really taking action and taking leadership.
How about if you're a witness to sexual harassment?
So I think that's where you say you need to speak up. So you need to find out. So if it happens in your workplace, who's the person you should be talking to about that? Make sure you know the policy around it. Know the policies in your workplace around sexual harassment. Right? If you see it just happening in the public, know what organizations are addressing that so you can report it. So again, I can give you a list. So you know, hey, I just witnessed this. Where do I report this, right? So you have some mechanism of channeling that, or just communicating that information to an organization that's really dealing with that issue.
And what does Women's Way do to change things? We
do a lot around, first of all, through our grant-making programs, we support organizations who are addressing gender-based violence. So, for example, in the Immediate Response Action Fund, we've been supporting a lot of shelters that actually help women that are fleeing domestic violence situations. We constantly research, so we find out, what's going on, what is the statistics. So we talk about the issue and educate people about the issue. Then we also educate people about what can you do to help be part of the solution and not just part of the problem. Because frankly, being a bystander and not saying anything is part of the problem, right?
Absolutely. Is this only a women's issue?
No, it's a human issue. It's a human issue. First, I want to be clear that men get abused. And actually, a lot of men and boys don't report it. And they then turn into abusers. It's a relational issue. It's a power dynamic. We can't solve any of this by separating men and women. We need to come together and talk about these issues and have really hard conversations, right? And really understand, what is it about those who are abusing? Why is there a need to do this? And what has happened to you? A lot of abusers have been abused at some level. There's emotional abuse, there's economic abuse, there's physical abuse, there's sexual abuse, right? And we have to start actually even allowing men and boys to have a voice about being abused as well. So it's a human issue. We have to bring the abusers together with those who have been abused, who have been harassed, and start having these conversations about how do we work together, how do we start creating a culture that's more respectful of each other, that's not being, where we have shared power with instead of power over. And those conversations are starting to happen, but a lot more needs to happen.
How strong is a society that doesn't respect half of the society?
It's a very weak society. We always say, divided we will fall. And this country is very divided on many, many, many levels. But yet I've seen the power if you have a process in place that creates a safe, open place to have a really hard conversation, you can start solving these problems and really coming together and coming up with new solutions.
So with this Me Too movement, the fact that all these complaints are popping up, does this mean that that abuse is increasing?
No, I think it's just people are speaking out.
So is this a good thing or a bad thing that we're starting to learn about this?
Oh, it's a great thing. You can't. One thing I'll say about Donald Trump. I'm sorry. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. He has brought issues to the table by just his actions. So the whole thing with race, right? This country was founded on a system of slavery and oppression and denying many people, including women, opportunities. And that foundation is a faulty foundation. Until we start having a conversation about that, we're never going to address these issues. And having people come out and speak about injustices and abuse of power, that brings it out on the table. If it's kept silent, how do we talk about it? How do we address it? We can't.
He kicked a bee's nest.
Right.
And that creates change itself.
Right. So I welcome this, and I welcome to have these hard conversations. And let's sit down and let's talk with people that we disagree with, that are so-called our enemies, because that's the only way we're going to solve these problems.
So what might seem like chaos going on in the news right now actually is a step toward growth, and you're optimistic.
Absolutely. Have to be optimistic.
Very good. We'll leave it there. Diane, I want to thank you for being a guest on
Larry,
Delaware County Political News.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Please come again.
I will. Thank you.
We have been here with Diane Cornman Levy, and I am your host, Larry DeMarco. If you like this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and to forward this link to all your friends on your contact list and Facebook friends. We're signing off. Tune in next time. Bye for now.